I don't think it would be a disagreeable statement to say that black metal isn't a very approachable genre for general music listeners, and to an extent, that's a major element of the genre's appeal for those who embrace it. Everything from the brash and unflinching depictions of religion, Satanism, and violence, paired with the unpolished thrashing nature of the music itself, serves to turn away those who don't see anything beyond the theatrical and nihilistic. But the aficionados who are dedicated and deeply engaged in the music and culture of black metal see these elements of the music as more than just shock. Like with other heavily criticised and scapegoated media in the past, black metal was once seen as a harmful and dangerous thing that mainstream media outlets, parents' advocacy groups, and even world governments spoke out against, as yet another tool to bring upon the moral rot of the youth. But in today's climate, black metal is far more generally accepted, even if the genre still remains firmly out of the mainstream and has a somewhat negative reputation with general music listeners. While the darker, grimier elements of the black metal scene are oftentimes used purely for artistic expression and to add to the mythos of the genre, there have been some examples of people in the scene who have been known to take things very seriously, and this on occasion has resulted in real crimes taking place that have shown the black metal scene in a very negative light. From church burnings and torture to sacrificial killings and everything in between. Today we'll be taking a look at the small number of people who saw the lifestyle of black metal not as a form of self-expression, but as an outlet for their darkest desires, those who wish to live out what the lyrics told and make them reality. These are the crimes of black metal. The cultural significance of black metal in Norway and other parts of Europe can't be understated, with the Norwegian black metal scene being the birthplace of many well-known acts and many elements of the genre that have now become standard. Bard Goldvik was one of the people to gain notoriety early on during the growing popularity of the black metal scene. Appearing under the name Faust, he would make a name for himself by playing the drums in a band called Emperor, which was established in 1991. However, his career as a drummer dates back earlier to a band named Stigma Diabolicum. The name Faust is derived from a German legend that tells of a man who sacrifices spiritual values for power or knowledge, and is often used to describe someone whose interests lead them into troubling situations. Throughout the 1990s, church burnings had become an associated part of the scene in Norway, with up to 50 churches being set ablaze by members of the community. Some of the most well-known people in the scene had either been theorised to have committed arson targeted towards churches, or had been surprisingly candid about doing so. Faust was convicted of one of these church burnings during this time, along with another member of Emperor named Samuth. In 1993, Faust was arrested under the suspicion of murder. On the 21st of August 1992, while walking home from a pub, he claimed that he was approached by a drunken gay man who attempted to convince him to have sex with him in a nearby wooded area. Faust agreed and the two left for the woods, where Faust would take the man by surprise and stab him to death. The man would be stabbed 37 times and would also be repeatedly stomped in the head. After the murder, Faust would later inform other members of the scene, including Euronymous, another well-known member of the black metal community and the owner of a shop called Helvet, which Faust worked at, and Varg and Euronymous, who Faust would later go on to help burn down a chapel with. Faust would manage to escape justice for a year before being arrested for the murder, where he would confess to the crime and would also be tied to the church arsons. He would be sentenced to 14 years in prison in 1994, where he would serve 9 of those years before being released on good behaviour. Faust has claimed that the crime was in no way carried out due to homophobic or satanic beliefs, sticking to his words that the murder was committed out of complete impulse. He's also since shown regret and remorse for the killing. After being released, Faust has continued to play a role in the black metal community, even reuniting with Emperor on a handful of occasions. While being seen as a very polarising figure in today's day and age, Varg and Euronymous was once seen as a bit of a tastemaker in the black metal scene throughout the 1990s, being at the helm of a solo music project known as Burzum, and being a part of the early black metal scene in Norway. In order to tell the story of Varg and Euronymous, we also need to recount the story of another man who would become directly associated with him, that being a man who went under the name of Euronymous. Euronymous is most well known for being the guitarist and co-founder of the metal band Mayhem, as well as establishing a shop called Helvet, which would become the stomping grounds for many of the early progenitors of black metal. It was also briefly seen as the main hub for a record label that Euronymous ran, although the success of this venture is highly questionable. Euronymous was also known for doing some pretty disgusting things over the years outside of his contributions to the scene, however. On the 8th of April 1991, he would return home to find that a fellow band member of Mayhem, known as Dead, had committed suicide by shooting himself with a shotgun. Upon stumbling across this opportunistic moment, Euronymous used a camera, which he had to go out and purchase, to snap cinematic images of his former friend's corpse, before pillaging it for pieces of fractured cranium, which he then fashioned into jewellery. Varg and Euronymous would become associated when Varg signed to the record label that Euronymous ran under Burzum, and also joined Mayhem as a bass player. While the two of them seemed to be on a similar wavelength, after a while an intriguing cult of personality seemed to form around both of them in the community, with many seeing Euronymous as the king or founder of black metal, and Varg as an intensely dedicated to his own set of ideologies. And while the two seemed to understand and appreciate each other, tensions would begin to arise as a rift between the two of them would form. It's not entirely known if a specific situation fueled the flames in this case, or if the two simply began to resent each other due to differences in belief. There is of course a chance that even if we did know, we probably wouldn't fully understand. From what can be found from statements made by those close to both guys, it seems like a mix of things. Both Euronymous and Varg seem to have labelled each other as some kind of poser, taking issue with how the other portrayed themselves. Which is ironic because despite hanging out with others who claim to be Satan worshippers, Varg himself never actually claimed to be one, and basically admitted to using the idea of Satan worship as a tool for shock. A dispute over money is also a possible motive, as Euronymous allegedly hadn't paid Varg all of the money he was owed from their record deal. Whatever the issue these two had with each other, Euronymous would begin going around and telling a small group in the community that he was going to kill Varg. These statements were then relayed back to Euronymous, who in statements made after the fact seemingly took them as legitimate threats. The growing animosity would come to a head on the 10th of August 1993, when Varg, accompanied with another black metal personality known as Blackthorn, would drive from Euronymous' apartment to meet Euronymous for what was supposedly a contractual meeting. What happens next is pretty definitive, but the statements given on why or how it happened make little sense. While Blackthorn stood outside for a smoke, Euronymous went up to Euronymous' apartment where the two of them got into a physical altercation. Supposedly Varg, armed with a freshly signed contract, was kicked in the chest by Euronymous, who then fled into his apartment, which caused Varg to chase him. Euronymous supposedly went to retrieve a knife to defend himself, which the two fought over, leading to Varg stabbing Euronymous to death, with the killing blow being a stab wound through the skull. Euronymous was found outside of his apartment with 23 stab wounds all over his body, and after the killing, Varg and Blackthorn fled in the direction of Euronymous' apartment. The idea that this altercation was ever intended to be civil is highly unlikely. As previously mentioned, both Varg and Euronymous had made many threats to each other that were seemingly taken seriously, so it's hard to believe that either of them didn't expect things to get violent when they saw each other. But what makes the whole thing even more unbelievable is that Varg tried to argue self-defense for this killing. Varg himself stated that he genuinely believed Euronymous was going to use this meeting as a way to ambush him, where he then claimed that he believed Euronymous was going to incapacitate him with what Wikipedia describes as an electroshock weapon, where he would then have been tortured and killed while Euronymous recorded the entire thing. Varg was arrested on the 19th of August 1993 and stood trial to 4 charges, including the murder of Euronymous, arson charges related to the burning of 3 churches, and a later attempt to commit arson on a 4th church, as well as also having stockpiled a large quantity of explosives that he may or may not have stolen. Faust and Blackthorn were also questioned about their relations to these cases as well, with Blackthorn receiving an 8-year prison sentence for being an accomplice to the murder of Euronymous. Varg was sentenced to 21 years in prison for his crimes, yet despite being incarcerated, Varg would keep himself busy. Varg had displayed white supremacist views throughout his life that could have played a role in his falling out with Euronymous, and during his time in prison he established a neo-pagan white supremacist group entitled the Norwegian Heathen Front, although some have claimed that Varg was only the self-proclaimed leader of the group. He would begin writing articles for right-wing magazines while also in prison. Varg's mother would be involved in a brief bout of controversy when the small right-wing group of individuals who had ambitions of breaking Varg out of prison were arrested, as it turned out that she had donated 100,000 kroner to the gang, which was suspected to be money of Varg that he had given to her himself. She would not face any punishment after claiming that she was unaware of the affiliations of the group. On October 2003, after being transferred to a second prison, Varg would escape and go on the run for around 3 days, where he carjacked a family at gunpoint and stole their vehicle. When he was arrested, he was found with a stockpile of survival gear that included weapons, as well as 2 firearms which were found in a shack that he had taken refuge in during his escape. After his prison sentence, which itself was marred with issues, came to an end, he would move to France where he married and was later arrested again, this time along with his wife who had purchased rifles, leading French authorities to worry that they were going to partake in terroristic acts. They were later both released with a fine. Since leaving prison, Varg has become known for online video creation, however his original YouTube video was removed. He also continued his music project Burzum for a time, and continues to live out a relatively simple life with his wife on a farm. It's unknown to this day if he feels any regret for killing Euronymous.